Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Each episode, we talk about a particular topic in the life of a professor. Ruth is a visiting professor at a large university in Ireland, and Claire is an associate professor at a primarily undergraduate university in Northern California. The purpose of our podcast is reflection, so we bring something we think is working and something we're working on to discuss. Welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. I'm Claire.
And I'm Ruth, and today we're excited to reunite with a former student of ours, David Zeitz. David took classes from both Claire and me and was an undergraduate research assistant in both of our research groups at Cal Poly Humboldt. He's just started graduate school at UC Santa Cruz this year.
We wanted to hear David's story about applying for and starting his graduate studies as one example for us to reflect on preparing interested students for graduate school.
Welcome to the podcast, David. We're delighted to have you on the show.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
So, David, we are super excited to have you on the show because we both know you so well through classes and research, and we really thought that hearing your story of starting grad school would be interesting and helpful for our listeners as they reflect on helping their own students go to grad school. So would you start off by introducing yourself to our listeners? Like, what's your academic background? What are you doing now? Anything else you'd like to share?
Sure. So my name is David, and I am formerly a student of both Ruth and Claire, as well as a research student for both of them. I did my undergraduate degree in chemistry at a small, primarily undergraduate institution in Northern California.
Have you read our intro?
And
I feel like it's like a mystery. The mystery, like we're like Hogwarts or something, but go on, sorry.
It's very mysterious. But yes, I am now a first-year PhD student at UC Santa Cruz, and I'm studying physical chemistry. And I guess my very abridged academic background is I was a community college student for a long time studying anthropology. I was a transfer student to a four-year university, and now I'm a PhD student.
Perfect. And after now your introduction, I have 20 side questions, but I'm going to hold on to them. But I guess one thing we wanted to ask you about is how did you choose where to apply? And then when you did get your offers, which were many, how did you select which one you wanted to go to? Or like, what were your kind of parameters?
So I had probably the most complicated algorithm ever for
in no way surprising, but
for selecting where to apply. So first, I asked a bunch of professors mainly what their opinion was basically as to how I should choose a place to apply. And sort of the two camps where you should apply sort of like you would apply to an undergraduate, where it's like, oh, let me pick my schools that are like a reach, schools that are maybe a little bit higher than I feel like I would be able to get into. What are ones that I feel like will accept me, and then what are ones that are like a safety school. And then the other camp was like, that is ridiculous. Absolutely do not do that. And like the school doesn't matter, and you should be looking into like who are the researchers at those schools and sort of identifying what people do you want to work with, and then like where do they work, and then apply there. So I kind of like smashed those two things together. I had this like massive spreadsheet where like first I identified all of my like non-negotiables. So I wanted to go to a school on the West Coast. I wanted to go to an R1, and I wanted it to have like a materials chemistry program or background of some sort. So I basically just went to like college rankings for the US and went through like the entire top 100 and just like pulled out every single school that met those criteria, like West Coast schools basically. And then from there, I like looked into their individual programs, what type of researchers they had there, what was their research focus, and then like narrowed it down from 16 schools to 8, from which I applied to 6. And in chemistry, at least, it's typical in PhD programs for people to do rotations. So even if there's one person at a school that you really want to work with and you're going to that school for that person, there's not necessarily a guarantee that you'll end up working for that person. So I found it helpful to like be a little more broad in my selection pool, rather than like pinning my hopes on one particular researcher.
Absolutely. And then like I remember having a student ages ago who went to somewhere just really, really, really cold, and they were genuinely miserable. Like, you know, and it feels like that's not something we talk about enough, but just the environment and where you're going to live.
Yeah,
absolutely plays a role.
That is very fair. That definitely played into my decision-making process. And also, I looked a lot into like the cost of living, because that is very important. Yeah. Unfortunately, it seems as though most R1 universities in California are in high cost of living areas. So it kind of ended up washing out. But I think those two things are very important. Like, because I feel like people feel like they have to go to a graduate degree for the love of it. Like, oh, like I just have a passion for science. And so it seems a bit off limits to think about like your personal comfort. But it's like you have to live in this place for many years.
It's a long time. Right. Totally. And like it can be, you're like, oh sweet, I'm going to be so rich, like because you see whatever stipend you're going to get, and then you get there and that's your whole rent or something. Basically. So yeah, I think it's really important. It's just such a, I mean, it's a bigger undertaking than undergrad even, right, in terms of time. So yeah. Okay, I'm going to zip it now. I could just keep going about that for the whole time.
So I do want to hear the answer to the second half of the question. How did you choose between the schools once you were...
Oh, yeah. Good job, Claire. Sorry.
So this was like the worst thing that I've ever done in my entire life, basically, having to decide. I like spent the entire time I was waiting on responses, like hoping secretly that I only got into one place so that I would not have to decide.
No algorithm necessary.
Yeah, no algorithm necessary. That did not happen. So I fielded a lot of advice again, and sort of thought, like, how do people that have already done a PhD, like, how did they choose where to go to school? And it was kind of like 50-50 between the people that were like, just go for the biggest name because nobody cares about anything else. And then the other half were like, you should go where you think you'll have like the best chance of doing research with the best researcher. Because like sometimes smaller name schools may have a more prestigious like individual researcher. And so that could be very important.
This is fun. I'm having flashbacks to when we had these conversations and you were like, you and Ruth have basically given opposite advice.
Yeah.
Did we? Oh, no way. This is controversial.
Yeah, you guys gave,
that's exciting.
You guys gave opposite advice when it came to like choosing where to apply as well. I will say too that, like, circling back to that question briefly, I don't know if there is such a thing as like a stretch or a safety school anymore. If there ever was, I think that like they're all equally rigorous. And I did not get into schools that were my safety school, and I did get into schools that were my like quote unquote reach schools. So there's really, I don't know. It feels very random. But choosing where to go, I was kind of like weighing, do I want the prestige and like the name recognition, or do I want like the guarantee of working with somebody who like has a lot of connections and that sort of thing. And so when I was trying to decide, I had already identified like what potential researchers that I wanted to work for at each of the schools that I had been accepted to. And so I was kind of weighing like money, like how much was the school offering me? And then on the, like an individual PI level, like, do they have multiple active projects? Do they have steady funding? And like, these were questions that I asked when I went to like the Accepted Students Day, where you have the opportunity to chat with people. I wanted to ensure that people weren't like on the end of a grant cycle and then they're retiring in 2 years or something. And then I had a lot of questions for them about like how they structure projects for their first year students. Like, what's their management style? Do you have something in mind? Are you just going to throw me in and expect me to like cure cancer by the end of my first quarter? Like what are we doing here? And yeah, that was kind of what the things that I was considering. And I think it's too early to tell if I made the right decision yet, but we'll see.
Well, I bet you did. That sounds very rigorous.
Yeah, I had this like giant spreadsheet where I was like, okay,
Wow.
green boxes, red boxes, everything like
That's
pros,
awesome.
cons.
Oh my God. I didn't know this was a thing you did.
Yeah, it's very, as I was doing it, I found it to be over the top because I like color code all my spreadsheets, but then I give myself a key in my spreadsheet for like what the colors mean, even though I'm the only one that is ever going to look at it or see it. I'm like, what if I forget that green means blah,
To be
blah,
fair,
blah.
having gone back over my old PhD notes like 4 years later, and you're like, what did any of this mean? So I'm a big believer in leaving yourself notes for sure.
So you're in your first quarter of grad school. What aspects so far are as you expected, and how did you get those expectations?
So I don't know if it's too early to tell, but so far I feel like everything is like as I expected it to be. I spent a lot of time like reading personal testimony on the internet about people's PhD experiences, which is not something that I know that I would necessarily recommend because people on the internet, it's like leaving like a review or something. I think there's a lot of negativity bias where like people go on and they're like, this was absolutely the worst thing that I've ever done in my entire life. And I think that can be quite demoralizing, but it also gives you an idea of like what to expect and also what not to do. So
Sure. What kinds of things are they complaining about? What kinds of situations they run
right.
into?
Yeah. So, I mean, so far, it's just like what I expected to happen would be some Venn diagram intersection of classes, seminars, research. And then I got here and they were like, go to class, attend seminars, and do research. So yeah, I don't know. It's been pretty steady so far.
Can you think of advice or information that you had before starting grad school that was helpful, and then advice that set you off on the wrong foot? I'm assuming none of that came from either of us, but anyway.
Yeah, the advice will remain anonymous, but it will be specifically worded so that if you gave it, you will know if it was you. No, I don't know. I don't know if I really got any bad advice. I guess I'll start with good advice. So a lot of people told me to like set early boundaries.
Oh, wow.
Because,
I wish I had that.
Yeah, which
advice.
even people at the university, I feel like maybe times are changing a little bit and they're realizing that perhaps people work best if they have like, don't live at the university and sleep on the couch or something.
Oh, man.
Yeah, and I've personally observed like PhD students that have absolutely no work-life balance, and I'm just like, wow, that will absolutely not be me. And I don't know if I'm being like overly optimistic about my ability to maintain these boundaries, but I'm hoping to just like, as long as I can.
Well, I think if you don't start with them, you sure won't.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean? And I'm sure there's ebbs and flows of like, we're really throwing down on this project right now, but that's such a good, because like, I don't know if this is a thing, but I certainly saw other groups where like people were expected to meet on a Sunday morning. That was when their group meetings were, or like Christmas Day was not a day that anyone could have off, or whatever holidays were important for people. Like there was no breaks.
Yeah.
And so,
it's a lot. And I feel like the institution in some ways like subtly encourages it even without meaning to. Like I'm taking this seminar about like learning how to be a better teacher. And like we were doing this group project and the person that was facilitating it was like, oh, the person that's the group leader is the one that woke up earliest this morning. And everyone was like, I woke up at 6 a.m. I woke up at 5:30. And I was like, I absolutely rolled out of bed at 9 a.m. this morning. So I will definitely not be the group leader. And I'm okay. I'm at peace with that. Yeah, so that was one good piece of advice, to set early boundaries. I will say that I'm not TAing this year. So it's a little bit easier for me to like not be overly engaged, I think, because I have less to do and less people emailing me. But also, a lot of people said to like say yes to learning new things. Like, oh, do you want to learn how to use the fill in the blank instrument that you've never seen or heard of or used before? And I've been trying to be really fastidious about not being the person that's like, what? No, I'm way too stupid to ever do such a thing. And instead just be like, you know what? I would love to like look over your shoulder while you do that.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm like a whole new person.
That was kind of my thing when you're always someone who was learning stuff, but just a little self-deprecating at times, but luckily that's over. But that's what happened when I started my job at our mysterious institution that we were at, just like saying yes to everything, which is kind of weird when you're saying also have boundaries, but like yes to new opportunities. I think that's beautiful advice.
Yeah, I'm trying to say no to side projects, but yes to learning new things. So like, don't say yes to everything. I love that
distinction. That's great.
And then I guess the last one is to go to all of the annoying first year like orientation / networking stuff, because that not only helped me decide where I wanted to go, like when I was choosing, but also it's great to make new friends. And I am a person who does not value friendship, so
extra important.
It's extra important to be forced into situations where you are required to meet people.
That's such good advice too, because I'm always the Grinch who's complaining about those things, and then they're good. Like even if you're just united by being irritated about them, that's still a connection. So
you're like, I saw you at that other thing we were irritated about. How's it going?
Yeah, we can all roll our eyes together and be like, oh, can you believe we have to do this? But then it's good.
Yeah,
definitely.
I'm like a little bit of an antisocial lab too. So I'll be like, oh, like, are you going to such and such thing? And they'll be like, no. And I'm like, but there's cookies. So, and it makes me feel it makes me feel so superficial, but I'm like, there's going to be pizza there. So I will absolutely be attending.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that's like, you've already hit like the main parts of my grad school experience was people sleeping on the couch. That was a big one. And also anybody doing anything for food, basically.
Yeah. It's a real party. Mm-hmm. But then unhelpful advice, I don't necessarily know if it's unhelpful, but I don't know if you guys like, if this is more of like, I hesitate to say my generation thing, but everyone has this like sleeper phrase ingrained in them that they learned at school, where it's like every person in America knows the phrase, the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. And it's just like, regardless of who you are, like everyone knows this phrase. This piece of advice I felt like was the professor equivalent of that phrase, because so many people told me like when I would be like, oh, I'm really worried because I'm really burned out like by my undergrad, so I'm afraid that I'm not going to be able to make it through like a graduate degree. And every single person was like, grad school is just different. And I'm just like, that is true. But what does that
and unhelpful.
What does that mean? It's very mystifying. And many people, including Claire, followed it up with more specific information, which
I do definitely remember. So.
Very helpful. But some people did not, and I feel like it just like adds to the undeserved mystique that like that shrouds the grad school experience, where it's like, oh, you'll just, when you get there, you will know. And it's like, well, why can't...
Aren't you excited, though, about being the person who can do that to other people later on? You'd be like...
I'm very...
That's how academia weird things perpetuate.
Yeah. Someone's going to ask me, and I'm just going to be like, well... I'm just going to like look off into the distance and be like, it's just...
Exactly.
It's just different. I don't know.
Perfect.
Oh, that's awesome. So, it sounds like a lot of grad school has been as you expected. Is there anything that has been surprising, or anything that you wish you'd known or heard of before you started?
Not really, because I think I was overly prepared going in. Like, there's some, I guess, small things. I hesitate to curse myself by saying this, but so far it's easier than I expected. Although I have my first ever midterm coming up in like 3 days, so we'll see after that how I actually feel about that. But everything is, like, content-wise, I thought it was going to be like a huge leap from undergrad to grad school. And there definitely is a content gap, because why wouldn't there be? Obviously, it's going to be more difficult. But there's less workload. Like, in my program, you only need like 5 core classes to graduate, spread over however long you want to take them. So it's like, in undergrad, you're taking 19 units of difficult classes, and then now I'm only taking 5 units of difficult classes. So it has the...
I'm just going to say, you were taking 19 units of difficult classes because you're an overachiever, but yes.
That is probably true. Yes. Everyone out there listening, please tell your undergrads to take 19 units every single semester.
No. That's not endorsed by the Professor Podcast. Well, that's interesting, because it kind of feeds into the next question, which is like, do you notice a gap between like your experience having gone to a primarily undergraduate institution and some of your colleagues who went to an R1? Do you have a sense of a different type of preparation? I mean, it's kind of like, we're not saying this, but people kind of have that idea that you might be less familiar with graduate school and stuff if you're coming from a primarily undergraduate institution.
I have not observed such a difference. I actually, in a lot of ways, feel more prepared than the people that I know that like went from R1 to R1. And I don't know if that has a lot to do with me having gone to undergraduate at a like primarily undergraduate institution, or if it was just a product of like the specific school that I went to. Because a lot of the benefits that I noticed from doing an undergrad in Humboldt was due to like the very extremely small size, which not every primarily undergraduate university is very small. But I don't know. I think that, like, sure, we don't have grad students in any of our departments, I guess, physics or chemistry in Humboldt. So I didn't have exposure to the like day-to-day minutia of being a grad student, but I was exposed every day to professors who went to grad school. So I don't know that it makes you less exposed to grad school, but I feel like it gives you a lot of benefits. Like, I've noticed already, like, I've used a lot of instrumentation that perhaps other people didn't have the opportunity to use in their undergraduate. And especially like coming off of COVID times, like Humboldt is so small that it was possible even when all these restrictions were in place. Like, I did both of my upper division analytical labs with Claire during like the height of COVID in person. And I went in, and like, if you're in a class of 6 people, it's possible to social distance like that. But if you're going to an R1 university and you have 400 people in your class, like, it's just never going to be possible during a pandemic, especially for you to have that same opportunity to work through the pandemic like that. And so I feel like I got a bit of a head start in that aspect as well. And I don't know, I hesitate to say, like, I feel like the education was also a little bit more rigorous than some R1s. I don't know if that's a controversial take, but that is what I have personally observed.
Well, that's great. You feel like you came in prepared, lots of experience with instrumentation, lots of rigor from your undergrad. Yeah, it's hard to extrapolate too far, but that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's been a good time.
I am about to start teaching a ginormous class that's like 380 people, which is so different than, like, David, I think our class that we had was like 11 people or something, and you could really like see everybody's face. Sometimes we didn't want you to, but you were like, oh, I don't think you understood that concept right there because you're making the confused face, and that will certainly not be an option.
Yeah, you
big class.
You like standing over my shoulder as I write on a whiteboard, which I still have, by the way.
Oh, that makes me so happy. Good.
It just haunts my dreams. I'm like, why is
Good, yeah, perfect. That's what I was trying to do.
Why is the
That's what I was
class so
shooting for.
small? Yeah. No,
I know, yeah. There's no snoozing down the back for sure. But
it's very different. Yeah, there's like classes here that are like, it's like, oh, OChem is 400 students. And I'm like, that's
goodness.
bigger than like our entire department was in Humboldt. So
yeah,
just
totally.
like, it's very different.
Mm-hmm.
So now that you're in grad school, looking back on this process, you explained all your algorithms and your thoughts. Do you have any tips for people applying to grad school?
My tips, what I did at least that worked for me, I consider myself to have had a successful run at applying to grad schools.
Obviously, yes.
I collected and completed all of my materials super, super early. So like for chemistry, at least, the majority of applications are due on December 1st, typically. And I had all of my stuff like ready to go and completed in October. And so I saw a lot of my peers that were applying to grad school that did not get their stuff ready early. Like now they're running up to December, finals are coming, they're trying to like get everything together.
Yeah.
Now you're asking for letters of rec from people who have already written 50,000 letters of rec for other people like me in October. And so it's like, and so I just felt like it was a lot more calming. Not that there's necessarily a benefit most of the time to applying early, but it is great for your like mental health. So I guess that counts as a benefit, right?
Oh, for sure.
And then also like when you're writing all your documents and materials, I feel like everyone has a different idea of what like absolutely must be in your like statement of purpose or whichever particular document. My tip is to not listen to any of them and and to just answer what the prompt asks you. Like just write to the prompt. Like you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Like just like whatever 5 things that they want to see, just put those 5 things in and then it will be fine.
I love it.
And also after they're written with care, have them proofread, which is absolutely agonizing and the worst thing that I've ever done.
100%.
Yeah, it was horrible. I like distinctly remember Claire trying to be like, do you want the people at this university to be the first people to read your statement of purpose? And I was like, I absolutely do, actually, because I don't know them. And I do not have to see their faces tomorrow after they read this. Yeah, but then it's fine. It is fine. Yeah. Lastly, I would say I would recommend like picking a struggle, you know, because when you're applying for grad school, there's like 5 or 6 things, a handful of things that like you have to submit as part of your application packet. And it's okay for you to be less good at one thing if you have like great things in every other area. And so like for me, I felt like my grades were like my struggle. And so like that was the thing that I went the hardest on. Not to expose too much about my personal information, but I was a transfer student from a community college. And when I transferred, I had a 2.4 like overall GPA. And typically you need a 3.0 minimum to even apply to grad school. And so I think that's where a lot of my personal like crazed nature came from, because I knew I wanted to go to grad school. I had like so many units already like backlogged that it was very difficult for me to get my GPA up to like scrape that benchmark, which ultimately ended up happening. But if someone had told me like, you're doing fine, I would have been like, I need an A+ in this class, and I will be in your office hours every single day until we make it happen.
But I do want to throw in, because like just in terms of actually being such a successful student, like you really engaged with your professors, and like you said, like went to all the office hours, and you seemed incredibly organized.
Yes,
and yes, I don't want to promote the being incredibly hard on yourself, but the other stuff does seem really positive. So do you have any advice for undergrads or for people who are mentoring undergrads about, and it's particularly maybe ones who are interested in grad school, but just general suggestions would be appreciated too.
Yeah, I feel like you don't have to reinvent the wheel, you know? Like, like go to office hours. If you need tutoring, go to tutoring. I personally went to tutoring a lot. And I also was a tutor, and I just wanted to shake people because I was just like, you would benefit so much from tutoring, but you refuse to go.
I know.
So don't be too proud, because for a long time, I was way too proud to go to tutoring. And so it changed my life. But yeah, don't reinvent the wheel.
I'm just going to interject with this, I'm having a profound moment, but I feel like the transition from being a person who can't admit you don't know something to being someone who's like, I'm just going to ask all the questions is the most powerful transition you can have in your life. Like, it's so huge. But just totally like being agree. Like, I'm going to go to tutoring, or I'm going to tell the person I have no idea how to do this thing is, yeah.
Or back to what we were talking about earlier with being in grad school, someone says, oh, do you want to come learn this instrument? You say yes, and then you ask all the questions and you learn how to, and that is hard because you're going to have to reveal that you don't already know how to do the instrument. But
yeah, totally.
It'll be worth it.
Yeah, it's maybe not like the healthiest mindset, but my current mindset and like my mindset, like when I was seeking a lot of help in undergrad too, was that I had already suffered through like every conceivable humiliating like professional and academic situation. So like what else do I have to lose, It's like we already did all that, like, so let's just go to tutoring and it will really be fine.
It's kind of like a what's the worst that can happen situation, and then you're like,
exactly.
Oh, it's how bad that's going to be fine. I'll just go to tutoring.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, but circling back more to the question that you actually asked.
Yes, sorry, I'm great derailer.
Something that I felt like I could have had a little bit more of from my mentors. I'm just kidding. I was a transfer student, and I don't know if this is something that I would have gotten more of if I was not a transfer student, like if I'd come in as a freshman. But I had no idea what an REU was at all.
Oh, I know.
In any way. Until I got like a random department email being like, here's an REU that you should apply for. And I wasn't going to apply for it because I didn't think it was for me. But then Claire like forwarded it to me. And then I was like, oh my gosh, let me look into like what this thing is. But it was totally, and I had been doing, I think, some undergraduate research at that point, and I still like, it was totally not on my radar. And I think that attending an REU and being successful in your REU can be so helpful to applying to grad school.
I have two things about this. One, I think it's a general issue that transfer students are not well served, like onboarding wise. Is onboarding a real phrase? Yes, anyway. But like introduction to the university and creating community, I think that's tricky. And then there's just so much stuff by osmosis, like things like REUs where it's like, how did I know that was a thing? And it's really tricky.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, we do explicitly tell our freshmen about them, and I guess we don't explicitly tell our transfer students about them, so that's good to know.
Yeah, it was. I don't want to say it's the reason that I feel like I got into grad school, but I think it was definitely a major contributor, and it worked out, so I can't complain too much, but I did feel like very blindsided. Everyone was like, I'm applying to REUs, and I was like, the what? Like
REU.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you, when I first moved from Ireland to America, it was a good 18 months of people dropping the word REU and me having no idea what it was. And I hadn't made that transition to being comfortable asking, saying, I actually don't know what this is. So it's just like,
Yeah, it was really fascinating because I was going to like work at Kohl's this summer. So like if I could do research instead, that would be like way better and cooler. And then I did. So it worked out.
Yeah,
That's
really
it's
helpful,
huge. Yeah.
Research instead, you're still getting paid, you're getting your research experience. Yeah. Is there anything else, David, that we haven't covered that you want to share with our audience or that we skipped over?
I don't know. I think we hit most of the David highlights. I guess the last thing that I would say, actually, my mantra the entire time I was applying to grad school was to not care about grad school, and that worked for me. So that would be my final recommendation.
Did you believe it, even though you were saying it to yourself?
Not at first.
I'm so curious.
Not at first.
Okay, wow.
But
Okay, you got yourself.
I put it on my fridge and I looked at it every single day, and then
I love that. It makes me think of, the pendulum idea where it's like if you're way too far on the side of caring about grad school, you don't have to worry about caring too little. That's not going to happen to you. So say, I don't care about it at all, and that's going to inch you in the right direction. On the other hand, if someone didn't care at all, then they would need to hear that it's a bigger deal. So anyway, I really like that you were realizing you were putting too much weight on it, took massive action, put it on the fridge, looked at it every day, and helped you inch in the right direction. That's great.
That's awesome.
I didn't mean to end the episode with a whole Claire monologue.
Oh my gosh.
Well, thanks so much for being on the show, David. It was really great talking with you about this.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. We're delighted to have you as a listener, and we would love to hear from you. And if you want to email us, our address is contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your suggestions for future shows or professor quotes that you might want to share with us, or even just things that have come up for you when you were listening to previous episodes. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love if you would spread the word. So the best way to spread word is by telling people if you think they should listen to it, or you can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.